Well, hey, I think we're
Morning.
live. Good morning, sir. I think we're live. And
Yeah,
and welcome everyone today to another one of our LinkedIn Lives and Team Talks. I'm really pleased today for two reasons. Ashley Rice, um, founder of Ashley Rice Professional Development, mentor and coach to recruiters all over the UK and sometimes beyond. We got introduced several years ago by one of my shareholders, Ian Nash, who he pointed out to me as my non-exec at Principal People that I needed some guidance and direction for some of my team, and you came in and really helped with my youngsters, my sort of Gen Zs,
yeah,
and had a really positive difference to some of the outcomes we had in our fairly rapid growth. So really looking forward to an interesting subject today, and we now have got an acronym for these youngsters. I just called them youngsters in my day, and it was so they were Gen Z, and turning the next generation of talent into high performance.
yeah,
What we're going to do today, you're going to run a few slides and sessions introducing and setting the narrative, aren't you? And
yeah,
and then I'm going to bounce off some questions for you that some of my experiences of nurturing and developing youngsters, and we want anyone who's on the call that's got any questions to fire some of your questions in the chat. So this will be won't be a big presentation. It will be a discussion throughout the session.
yeah,
That's pretty
absolutely.
cool. Well,
Good.
Ashley, welcome and take it away, sir.
Thank you, Simon. So look, it might be good just to start with. I'll give you a bit of context as to why I feel that I can talk about Generation Z, because I'm definitely not of that age. But yeah, some context might help. So I've been in the recruitment sector for about 25, 26 years now. I'm 51. I was a bit older when I got into recruitment. I was mid to late 20s. But fundamentally, what I do, I work with high growth recruitment businesses and some tech business as well. And I help to build capability in the leadership team so they can deliver on the growth plans that the board has got. So I do that from a perspective of, I spent 10 years at Hayes, running some quite big teams there, up to sort of 60, 70 across multiple locations. And then I was managing director of a niche risk and governance recruiter in the city. So it was about 12 people when I joined, and we grew that to about 40, 50 people over the 5 years I was there. But in 2018, I made a decision to do a coaching qualification and move into what I do now. So I've been doing this for 8 years. I've worked with, crikey, must be nearly 70 recruitment businesses over those 70 years, usually in the kind of size that your members are, right? So from smallest, about 8 to 10 people, up to probably a couple of hundred. But my sweet spot is probably about 20 to 50, where businesses are scaling and they need to build that capability and that leadership team for them to be able to facilitate that growth. And I think over the last 5 years, the world has changed massively. We've got a new generation coming through into the workplace, Generation Z, which is what we're going to talk about this morning. And also, it's a different workplace. It's a different world since the pandemic. I think people want different things from their leaders. They want different things from their jobs. So we've got this dual challenge of a new generation in a kind of post-pandemic world, and I think that creates a lot of challenges for managers about how to drive performance through people. And I think a lot of managers grew up, I'm kind of like assuming here, but in the noughties and in the tens, when recruitment management was very different. It was quite transactional. It was very much what can I get out of you. It was quite command and control. And I think leaders have to take a different approach these days to getting the most from Generation Z. So that's what this morning's about. It's about giving you guys a few tips on how to get the best out of your young people, as you might call them. But first of all, I thought it might be good just to give a bit of context as to who Generation Z are, or Zoomers, as they're quite often known, and what they're about. So I'm going to try and share some slides now. I'm only going to do 3 slides, and then we're going to move into a Q&A. And like Simon said, if you've got any questions along the way, then feel free to post those. If you'd rather wait until the end, then we'll leave some time at the end to go through some questions. So here we go. I'm going to try and bring up some slides. So can we see those slides, Simon? Yeah. Can we see those, Jahisha? Just so I'm clear. Okay. So who are Generation Z? So Generation Z are born from 1997 to 2012. So they're aged 14 to 29. So they haven't been in the workplace that long, probably about the last 9-10 years. So we're still learning a lot about who they are. Now, I'm going to ask you guys in a minute about which generation that you come from, because if we look back, there's been 4 key generations over the last 50, 60 years. The first one would be baby boomers. So they were born 46 to 64. So they're 62 to kind of 80 years old now. So they're a declining part of the workforce. So they represent about 15% of the current workforce. So if you are a boomer, so if you're 62 to 80 years old, then can you just put a comment in the chat to say that you're a Zoomer? We just want to get an understanding of how many people we've got in each generation. So if you're a boomer, then please can you put that in the chat? I don't expect a lot. Simon? Okay, so no boomers at the moment. So we've got then Generation X. So this is my age. So born 65 to 1980, so 46 to sort of 60 years old. These are one of the predominant parts of the workforce, about 25 to 30%. So if you're in that age group, 46 to 61, then can you put something in the chat just to say that you are in that group? We've got Jahisha, who's a cheeky millennial. Jahisha's a late millennial.
Can we just be careful with your screen share because it's okay. Duplicating many. Jahisha, if you can help him out.
Jahisha, maybe you could just let me know how many we've got in each. Then we've got Generation Y, millennials. So this is the most written about generation in history, I think. So 30 to 45 years old. These are the predominant part of the workforce. So representing about 35%. So if you're a Zoomer, if you're a millennial, Generation Y, then put it in the comments. And then finally, we've got Generation Z. So these are people who are born more recently. And we've now moved into Generation Alpha, actually. So those of you who've got kids who are 14 and under, they are Generation A, which actually sounds like the coolest generation to be part of, being an Alpha. So maybe, Jahisha, in a bit, you could let us know how many we've got in each cohort. But let's talk a little bit about who they are. So Generation Z are digital natives. So Generation X built all of the technology. But Generation Z haven't known life without technology. And they're what we call asynchronous communicators. So, and this has a big impact, actually, particularly in the recruitment sector. So the way that they like to communicate is through devices. So if you look at that at home, that's things like WhatsApp, it could be Snapchat, but they like to communicate through devices where the chat isn't immediate. So they get a little bit of time to actually think about what they want to say. And if you take that in the work environment, that's things like using Teams or other messaging devices. So if you think about a large part of what recruitment consultants, a large part of what their job is, it's actually being on the phone. But those of you who've got kids with phones, teenagers, probably know that they don't tend to call. Actually, they will tend to message. They message their friends. They'll message their parents. They don't really use phones to communicate in a non-synchronous kind of way, which is what probably Generation Y and Generation X did. So the big users of technology. Secondly, they've been shaped by economic uncertainty. There's a lot happened in the last 20 years. There was a financial crisis, 2008, 2009. We've had Brexit. And then the biggest impact recently is the pandemic, which I believe had a huge impact on people's view of work and actually what they want from their job. And we had the Great Resignation after the pandemic. A lot of people had a lot of time at home to think about, do I like my job? Does my manager invest in me? Do I like the commute that I'm doing to go into my job? And lots of people decided they didn't, and they moved to the South Coast, or they became a plumber. There was that big reset after the pandemic. But that's also had a big impact now in terms of, things like flexibility, things like working hours. Quite a few companies are doing 4-day weeks, because I think now there's a big case to be answered that maybe people value time more than they value money. But also as well, there's been a huge cost of living crisis over the last 5 or 6 years. And it's an expensive world to live in. And, 20 years ago, when people got into recruitment, they told me that they wanted to earn 100 grand a year. And people are still saying that now, but £100,000 a year doesn't go as far as it used to. I mean, a pint was, I don't know, £3.50 20 years ago. It's £7 now. Rent's doubled, food's doubled in price. So actually, although I don't believe money is people's main motivator, they are motivated by money because it's expensive to live. And then the final thing that defines them is they tend to be more values driven and socially conscious. They do prioritize mental health, and they do prioritize values alignment and purpose. And what I mean by that is actually, do their own personal values align with the values of the business? And this is the kind of fluffy stuff that a lot of recruitment businesses maybe they might have up on the wall, but actually, are those values really part of the DNA of the business? Do they hire people, fire people, reward people, make business decisions by those values, and hire people that have an alignment with those? And also as well, I think Generation Z have got a real sense of purpose. They want to feel like they're part of something more than just sending CVs every day. So they're very into purpose-driven businesses, and that could be things around CSR, it could be things around B Corp. But that vision, actually, what does that business want to be? What is it trying to change? So they want something more than just being sat at that desk. So they're quite a complex group of people to deal with. And I think all generations are defined by is how they react to the world around them. And you may have heard of the VUCA generation, which was coined in the early 80s as a reaction to the post-Cold War world. And that's that kind of volatile, unpredictable, complex and ambiguous world that was created in that post-Cold War environment. But actually pre-pandemic, there was a new phrase that was coined to describe the world, and that's BANI. And that is that the world is brittle. So we think systems are quite reliable, like technology, but they can collapse really easily. There's a lot of anxiety, there's rapid change, which generates stress. And also the world's non-linear, cause and effect aren't proportionate anymore. And also, for a lot of people, the world's incomprehensible. Attempts to understand the world can be futile, and there's too much data and not enough meaning. So all Generation Z really is a product to the environment within which they've been brought up in, and that has been best described as that BANI environment. So as managers, we have to understand that, and we have to learn how we can drive performance in this post-VUCA BANI world, where the people that are moving into our workplace have different priorities. So that's who they are. And why they matter to you guys as recruitment leaders, as business owners, as managers. Well, they're your current and future workforce. And there's a lot of them. Various estimates between 20 to 25% of the UK workforce, so around 6.5 million workers. And there's more to come. By 2030, they will be the predominant generation within our workforce. And sector dominance. They're dominant cohort into this set. They're your consultants, they're your future managers, and they are your billing backbone. So it's really important that we understand who they are, what they want, how we can help them get that, and how we can drive performance through this new generation. So managing Zoomers can be costly, I think, and maybe Simon may have some more up-to-date information on this, but I think that there's a 70% turnover of staff in the recruitment sector in the first year. and that is bringing on people that haven't done the job before. And we all know it's really hard to tell whether people are going to be good at a job they've never done before. But that can be costly, anywhere between 20 to 50, 60,000 pounds per individual that you bring in that doesn't work out. But managing them in the right way, if we can find the right people whose values align, and we can onboard, and we can manage and motivate and develop them in the right way, it can be an absolute game changer for businesses. Because the biggest challenge, in my experience, the 70 businesses I've worked with over the years, the biggest challenge they've got to scaling is bringing in the right people and having the right managers doing the right things to develop and motivate those people. So it's a really important topic, and one that I'm really, really passionate about. So look, that's all the slides that I'm going to do. So I'm going to move back and I'm going to take this off. So Simon, are you still there?
He's back. I'm definitely here.
Hello, Simon. Hello, Simon.
I was just trying to check my stats on that. On the dropout, actually, but I'll come back to that. Well, thank you for that. That's there was some powerful stuff in there. The one of the things that I've had a bit of in discussions with recruiters, not necessarily team members, is there's quite some of the old-fashioned recruiters that grew up in using the phone, getting out face-to-face with people, using old communication networks like the phone and face-to-face, a sort of positioned Gen Z as being a bit lazy, and they're not as resilient enough as, say, recruiters from a different world. But I think you quite rightfully explained that they communicate very differently. And they've grown up and nurtured and in those core years as teenagers, and been at school, perhaps, and remote schooling, potentially some of them that have been through the COVID process. So they're in a completely different space to older recruiters, if you like. So if Gen Z aren't lazy, so what are leaders getting wrong about them at work?
I think a big thing is this the time, right? Actually, I hear it a lot that Zoomers don't work the kind of hours that business owners or consultants used to work 10, 15 years ago. When I got into recruitment, it was the rule was you didn't leave before your manager. You know, contracted hours were 8:30 till probably 6:30, and the expectation was that you worked those longer hours. And Generation Z are much less likely to do that. And I believe that is because they value time more than they value money. And although it's not scientific, I've run motivation exercises with probably over 1,000 consultants with managers over the last 6 or 7 years. And the mistake that a lot of managers make is that they still think that money is people's top motivator in recruitment. And actually the reality is that's not the case. Because motivation isn't binary. We're motivated by more than one things, and those change over time. So money will always sit somewhere, especially as we live in a really expensive world. But it tends to come people's top motivators when you have those Kairos events in your life. You got Kairos events and Chronos. So Chronos are things like, you know, birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries. Those Kairos events are things like getting married, buying a flat, going on a big holiday, going traveling, where actually that you need money to be able to facilitate that. And what I find is when people go, right, well, I need £35,000 to get married in 18 months' time, that gives people a lot of focus. It gives people purpose. It gives people a clear goal that they need to achieve. And they can relate that back to what they're doing on a day-to-day basis if they've got a good manager. So at times like that, money is a really big motivator for people. But outside of that, it tends not to be. If people are earning a good salary, they can afford to do the things that they want to do, they're motivated by other things, which could be purpose, it could be autonomy, progression, recognition, responsibility, those kind of things. But if you think logically, Simon, if money was people's top motivators, particularly Generation Z, what kind of behaviours would you be seeing on a sales floor?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I open that to any questions from managers that are looking after. Oh, my team, my team branding has collapsed. Fortunately, I haven't collapsed.
Still there.
Bella will fix that for us, and my able Gen Z assistant will help out with that. Sorry, just go back to that question again. Not that I'm totally distracted, but partially.
I'll give you. I was working with a business in Manchester, and I was having this exact conversation with the head of L&D, the perm director, and the contract director, a sales floor of about 50, 60 people, right? And I said to them, "What do you think is the main motivator for people on the sales floor?" And both of the directors said it's money. And I said, okay, so if it was money, what kind of behaviors would you be seeing from the people on your sales floor? So that are things like, well, they'd be on the phone more, they'd been coming earlier, they'd be staying later, they might be asking more questions, they'd be more focused. And actually, they weren't seeing a lot of those behaviors. And the head of L&D turned around and said, Ash, at 5:15, it's like the school bell goes.
Yeah.
Everybody just gets up and leaves. And out of that 60, there might be 2 or 3 people that are left. So what does that say to you? That they value money more or time more?
Most certainly.
The answer is time. Now, that's not to say that Generation Z are lazy, because actually if they're passionate, they're engaged, they find the work that they do meaningful, they enjoy it, then they'll work hard. But what they're not into is presenteeism. And actually, I question some of the recruiters that I work with in the 10s were there for 12 hours a day, but actually, what were they producing? So if you think about, you've got contracted hours, 40, 50 hours a week, then most businesses focus on 2 placements a month. So I think the job of a manager is how do you help people in your team to make 2 placements a month in that 160 hours a month, right? Because if they can't, then maybe the target's not realistic, or maybe it's a skill issue or a will issue. If they want to do more than 2 placements because they're getting married and they want more money, they want to be number 1, they want to get promoted, they want to move to the US and they've got certain targets to hit, then they'll stay later. So motivated people will stay later because they want to stay late, not because they feel that they should be present. So a job of a manager is to get individuals in their team to be able to hit their targets within their contracted hours. And if they want to do more, they will stay later or they'll come in earlier. But I think the expectation around people just staying late these days, it doesn't create the right culture.
I agree with you. But is it the manager's job or the boss's job to unpick what real motivations are for those individuals on a one-to-one basis? Try and understand, and you might have to peel back several layers there to get to the truth of that, but find out what these youngsters' real motivations are, and then try and harness that with a purpose that's aligned in the business, so that there's some mutual alignment there. And then, I've seen things take off for people. If you can, I remember Bella saying her old manager at Principal People, George, who you might remember, would say, Bella, when are you going to get a new car? And she said, I want to get a new car. And he said, right, let's plan for that next year. And let's think about what you want and how much that costs and what you need to earn, and how can we build this into your activity, and you can get a successful outcome. And that became purposeful for her when she didn't have a purpose. She didn't think about that.
Because
he unpicked that, which was
and that's a Kairos event, and you can directly link that back to. It's an easy one, right? You need 12 grand to buy a car. That means you need X amount of deals, and to do that based on your ratios, CVs, interviews, jobs, right? But actually, I do believe your fire alarm going off.
Yeah, don't worry, it's a test.
Everybody's different, right? And there's still the assumption that people are motivated by their main motivator is money. And like I said, if their main motivator was money, then they'd be doing all the things that you wanted to do them, that they needed to do, because they wanted to earn more. So the question, still at interview, people go, they're programmed to say, right, what do you want to do this? I want to make money. But then they don't dig into it. They go, okay, well, how much do you want to make, right? What will it mean to your life if you make that? What will it mean to your life if you don't? How would you feel? And then it's what else, because motivation isn't binary, and we don't look at the what else motivates people. Yeah, what are you going to achieve through this job professionally and personally? What's going to get you out of bed in the morning when you don't want to? And I don't think people look at that kind of next level down, which is the values level. So yeah, it's a manager's job to do that.
When we before we get to employ these people, what I might be jumping around a little bit here, but I want to make sure that how do you unpick an interview process, a Gen Z who might be right for you if you can nurture them? You work with me with a load of I'll call them Gen Zs in the noughties as we were building Principal People, and they were 18 to 30s, weren't they? At that, the oldest was 30.
Yeah.
We found through interview process, we were looking for sponges that didn't have the skills or the experience or the potential skills were there. They didn't have experience at all. They didn't have experience in life, a lot of them as well, because they were straight out of college or uni. But we were looking for the sponges rather than the rocks, if you see what I mean, as a rather crude analogy. So yeah, youngsters that we felt we train and develop and nurture and take them on a journey to create a career within our industry. And so any tips and guidance at that early stage of choosing your sponges, not your rocks, because at interview stage, you mentioned earlier, what a waste when 60% of these people are falling out in year one. In this, we're in a tough market. We still got 34,000 recruitment companies. We got 40% less jobs than we had 3 years ago. This is a tough place to be, whatever age you are. But as Gen Z learning with different comm skills, this is really challenging. So how do we choose those sponges at interview stage? What do we look for?
Well, there's two different things. If we look at actually the majority of Zoomers that are coming in might not have any recruitment experience, right?
Yeah.
It's much easier to reference experienced consultants in terms of what they've done, how they've done it, and how they go about in their new job, right? But it's impossible to tell whether somebody's going to be good at a job they've never done before, right? So you have to look at two things. You have to look at behaviours, because past behaviours are a good indicator of future performance. So things like resilience, which is tenacity, perseverance, things like work rate, things like the ability to learn, where they've had a clear goal and they've sacrificed something to achieve that. If they can demonstrate those behaviours, that's a good indicator that they'll perform in the environment that they're going to be exposed to in recruitment. But we also have to start looking at a values level and actually understand what do they value and do they align with the values of the business, right? Because if I value honesty and it's really important to me, and I look for that in my friends and my family, but I move to a business that doesn't, and they're a bit sharky, and people hide CVs, and they don't work with each other properly, then that's going to demotivate me because my values don't align. So the more questions that we can ask around values, and I've got some good questions that I can send out to people that can help you to understand the values of that individual, because I think the closer aligned people are in terms of values and their past behaviors, we can teach them the rest, right? But if the values aren't aligned or the behaviors aren't, they're always going to struggle. And look, I've made tons of bad hires I made some great hires, but also I made some bad hires in the past, and it always comes down to the same thing. The behaviours or the values weren't there. They were all bright enough to be able to do the job in the large part, but just did they really want to?
Yeah.
The final thing is purpose, right? Actually, does your company have a clear vision about what they want to achieve, why they want to achieve it? Because, like I say, Generation Z are into purpose. And I think that's really important. I look at some companies like Trenovo Group, for example, that have got clear purpose around creating communities around, their B Corp strategy. And young people really buy into that because they feel like it's got meaning.
Yeah, we've got I think 4 B Corps now in team, and if it's easier for them to recruit youngsters with a passion and purpose, because it's easy for those Gen Zs to align with that, because they can
Yeah,
see there's absolute tangibles in that organization that they're truly aligned with.
yeah,
And you know, and those organizations won't work in anyone that does gambling or cigarette manufacturing, or you know, things like that. Or actually in defense too, albeit that a lot of defense stuff is protective and about it's about security, not aggression. So, you know, some B Corps do work in the defense space, but it's on products or services that are protective rather than aggressive. And so you have to be aligned with that one.
you know, and
Um,
I think, and having that clear vision, you know, there's a guy, a company called Hampton North, run by Stuart Mitchell, who was ex-Dot and Main. He set up 2 or 3 years ago out on the West Coast, and they specialize in cybersecurity. And his vision is to be the
yeah,
most trusted cybersecurity recruiter in North America. And it's a really simple, clear vision, but actually people buy into that. And if that's
yeah,
your North Star as a business, and actually, you know, it helps to define your journey and what you do along the way. You know, how are we going to be trusted with by our candidates, by our clients? What do we do? What do we do well that makes us trusted? What do we need to stop doing? And if you align with that vision and you do things that are going to move you closer towards being trusted by your candidates, trusted by your clients, you're going to make more money as well. But
yeah,
people don't buy. People, even millennials, tend to not buy into the number. The 2 million, 3 million, the EBITDA, it doesn't really mean a lot to them. But actually, being part of, yeah, I want to be part of the most trusted cybersecurity company in the US. I think that's really valuable, you know. Or actually,
mm,
a company I'm working with at the moment, Thrive, they're about changing lives for
mm,
clients, for candidates. And again, I think a lot of business owners think it's quite fluffy, but
mm.
vision, purpose, values, it's a big part of Generation Z. And actually, you can still use it to help make money.
Yeah.
Define your journey and your culture.
A non-negotiable. What would Gen Z tolerate less than any previous generation when it comes to management? What have
I,
managers got to think
I
about?
think, like we've moved away from that kind of command and control
Yeah.
sort of management, which was very predominant when I got into recruitment. You
Mm,
know, it was like 15 development calls a day with outcomes, I speaking to somebody, and you just do it, right? It's the old JFDI. If you
mm.
remember what, I obviously can't say what the F is because it's swearing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But and you weren't really given any context. You weren't allowed to challenge, and you just got on and did it. And like I
Mm,
say, you stayed later with your manager. But now actually people want to understand, well, why am I doing this? What's the context? Why is it important? And how is it going to help me to achieve my goals? So we've moved from that kind of command and control, that just working hard for the sake of it is good. That transactional relationship between a manager and a consultant, which is what can I get out of you, to this
mm,
more of an invested leadership, which is what my methodology is. It's what can we create together? What do you want from this job, professionally and personally? Why is it important to you? How can I help you get that? Right? And actually spending time with people, coaching rather than telling. I mean, coaching's a big one, right? People
mm.
don't really understand, managers really don't understand what coaching is, and they tend to tell a lot. And if somebody's telling you how to do your job all the time, what do you think that does to your level of engagement and confidence? So they don't tolerate being told. They will challenge, in that command and control environment, they just don't respond to. They want to be
Mm.
developed. They want to be
Yeah.
coached. They want that experience of discovery. So, yeah, for me, great managers, that's the way they're investing in their people. They're moving from that transactional relationship.
How difficult is it now to develop and support and manage Gen Z in a hybrid or even worse, remote environment? Yeah.
It's a really good question, right? Because I work with some businesses that are 5 days a week in the office,
Mm,
some businesses that do a 4 day week, some that do a 3 and 2, some that do a 2 and 3. And I think it's really hard to bring people through when they're working at home. And I think actually that the pandemic proved that. But I do believe that if there's trust, there's respect, then we know that Generation Z do want that flexibility, then I think it can be a good thing. But those businesses that are working 5 days a week in the office still aren't struggling to hire. And actually some businesses that do a 4-day week are having the same challenges as companies that do a 5-day week. But I think flexibility is just expected now. I think it comes down to the individual business owner. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it's what do you want to do? What do you want the culture of your company to be?
Yeah, no, fair enough. Liz Harris has asked us a question here. And I'm guessing this is at interview stage. When a candidate is Gen Z and the interviewer is Gen X, who should flex? Don't you just define the rules and if Gen X is the business owner or manager, this is how we develop.
I think. Well, so just to answer, I think as a business owner, another thing that you need to be really clear about at interview is expectations around performance and behaviour. It shouldn't be a surprise on day one, right? So if it is 5 days a week in the office and you expect hard work, we can't just say hard work, but hard work means, there's targets. We're going to expect you to hit those. You're going to be on the phone, and that looks like you're on the phone 10 to 10 candidates a day, whatever it might be. I think. Yes, the Gen X person should be setting the expectations because that's what they're going to be expected to do. So it shouldn't be a surprise. And then the Gen Z can go, well, actually, I'm either in that or I'm not.
One of our members who employs quite a few staff, he's got a lovely big office in Birmingham. He said, we do have flexibility. He said, but new staff have to come in 5 days a week for 3 months. He said after that we break down that flexibility and they can pick and choose, but a minimum of 3. But he said, to kick off, I need them there because I can't. They need to soak up the osmosis of working with more experienced people and understand. And he said we can coach because they copy, and that's quite a nice way of coaching rather than telling. They can sit with people and listen to people to how to do things well, whether it be candidates, clients. And he said, if we'll know within 3 months whether they're going to be right then. He said, so if we've made the wrong decision or the candidate has made the wrong decision, we can have an honest and open conversation about what's right for both parties and either part company or really invest in, bringing them up to speed or whatever.
Yeah, and what I like about that, it's really clear, right? And you can say that interview, and then it's what happens after that. And what a lot of companies make the mistake is not having a clear work from home flex policy, and where there's grey areas, that's when it tends to cause problems.
Performance, not compliance, is something I had in the questions. I was prepared. Managing Gen Z for performance, not compliance. What does that look like day to day for managers? I think understand that one. Yeah.
I think for me that means that, again, this comes down to this invested leadership, right? It's actually giving people context. So each day, do people know what they need to do, how to do it, how much, and why they're doing it, right? So depending on where that person sits on the experience spectrum, it's then how many interactions a week do I need with that person to make sure that they're set up for success and they're going to have the most productive week possible, right? And am I using those interactions to coach, to challenge, to guide, to mentor? Okay, not just tell them, right, this is what I need from you. So it's about that, but it's also about managers then holding them accountable, and not like I'm going to give you a kick or take your chair away or wrap a phone cord around your PC if you don't do those things. It's like if somebody hasn't done something that they've agreed to do, it's the manager's job to understand what's happened. So I call it popping the hood, right? If they've not done what was agreed, let's dig into the detail and find out what stopped you. Okay, and through coaching collaboratively, let's figure out what you could do differently tomorrow or next week that would produce a better result. And I'm going to hold you accountable to doing that. And again, that's moving from the invested to the transactional. Transactional is, you've had a bad week, I'm going to give you a bit of a kick at the end of the week, and you're going to come in and have a better week next week.
Yeah.
People don't respond to that as well as they do to actually, I've not had a great week. Let's figure out together what we can do better next week. So day to day, it looks like spending time with your people. Right?
Yeah. Am I right in saying Gen Z want more feedback than most other, uh, with most
Um,
other sections, but leaders are a bit worried about creating dependency.
I think I think it depends on how you feed back, right? Because
Okay.
you can give direct feedback or you can do coaching, and a methodology that I teach for feedback is called Cubic. So it's question,
Okay.
behavior, impact, question. So it could be, I just overheard that call that you made. Is it okay if I give you some feedback?
Yeah.
Asking permission. This is what I noticed. What impact do you think that might have had on the candidate or the client? And then what could we do differently next time that would produce a better result or might mitigate what you said just happening? So you're giving feedback, but it's doing it in a coaching collaborative way that's challenging them to come up with the answer. So actually a manager's job is to help people grow and develop, and by giving feedback in that way, that's helping them to do that. So I don't think feedback creates dependency. I think everybody wants it, everybody needs it, but it's just how you do that.
Mm. Some stats I do have with it. I think, am I right? And I might be quoting wrong here, but unemployment around 5%, but with 16 to 25-year-olds, it's 15% at the moment.
Oh wow!
And 700,000 grads haven't got jobs. So there's some talent in there, isn't there? And is there nervousness with management about those youngsters? Is that a combination of the fact that there's not so many jobs out there at the moment, and is it easier for an employer to grab someone with some experience rather than potential? Whereas you identified earlier, by 2030, these are going to be the dominant workforce,
Yeah,
and future leaders and billers, certainly in the recruitment space.
yeah.
What can our members say to some of their clients to encourage some of the opportunity that are in that 15% of unemployed at the moment? Because
Well,
there'll be some jewels in there, won't there?
there are, but it's actually we're not. I don't think recruitment businesses are very good at finding them, considering it's like the shoe shiner with the shoes that aren't very clean, right? I think we're very good at working for other people and finding them great people, but actually, when we do it ourselves, we tend to be again quite transactional in our approach to hiring. And I think, and this is a broader question, businesses that I'm working with are struggling to hire good people at the moment. I don't know whether the recruitment industry has become less attractive, whether it is because it maybe doesn't align with Gen Z values so much. But considering if you're sending 700,000 graduates out there without any jobs, I'm working with businesses that are struggling to find good people with the right kind of behaviors and values to be successful in recruitment.
And the upside is I've watched a couple of youngsters who started. I call them youngsters because everyone's a youngster to me, even you, Ashley.
Thank you.
But I would say one's in his 30s, she's in his 20s, and they started their business in 24, summer of 24, partnership. They've now got 10 staff.
Yeah.
And they're young and they've hired Gen Zs. They are Gen Zs. And the culture in that business is you can feel it, you can touch it.
Yeah.
You can, they have brainstorming sessions at breakfast. They take them out for breakfast once a week to have a brainstorming session. How can we do things differently? So lots of open feedback, and no idea's a daft one, that sort of thing.
And that's such a good point, because you talk about engagement, right? And staff engagement is about conversation, right? It's not about management telling consultants, this is what's happening, this is what we're doing. It's about actually having a conversation, and those kind of sessions are probably why they've got a bunch of people that are reacting well. And a lot of recruitment is still obsessed with training. They train on a weekly basis, bi-weekly, but It's not followed up with any element of accountability, success measures, any kind of coaching. And we know that 80% of training gets lost unless it's followed up with those things. But actually, if you do more workshop-based development, where you actually frame the problem and then you ask the group the right questions so they come up with the answers themselves, that's engagement, that's a conversation, that's how you innovate. You can't innovate by telling people that this is the way it's always been done, so that's the way we're going to do it. They might actually come up with some ideas that are better than yours. And the reality is, if people come up with the ideas themselves, they're much more likely to go away and do something about it. So it doesn't surprise me that business is taking that approach. And this is what I'm encouraging all the businesses that I work with now. Move away from training and telling, and move more towards that collaboration, that innovation, and that coaching. I mean, if the ideas that they come up with are a bag of spanners, it's not going to work, well, then you can challenge them on it.
But it's an opportunity to encourage those that have a spark of an idea and draw that out and build on that with others, and encourage others to really think before the meeting, what can we do differently next week? How can we
innovation, collaboration, that's engagement, that's all of those things. It's not that the old school kind of directive, tell, parent-child relationship. Much more coaching. It's much more of an adult to adult relationship, which again is what Generation Z are looking for. They don't want to be patronized and constantly told what to do. Unfortunately, that's the reality of what this group of people are like.
You talked earlier about different types of businesses that Gen Z might be attracted to. We've had a member join recently who just is supporting graduates in finding jobs. I've heard that sounds to me like a perfect place for Gen Z to work in, because they can deal with the community they're supporting are the same age as them. But is there other sectors or other specialisms that you think a potential Gen Z would be aligned to? You mentioned earlier, I think you mentioned a couple like anything environmental or a B Corp. But any other sectors you think, well, that a good Gen Z person would be a good candidate for that pool?
I think maybe it's less about the sectors that they hire into and actually more about the business itself, right? And I genuinely believe that Gen Z are not lazy, and all that's happening is millennials are saying about Gen Z what Generation X said about millennials, and you can trace it back hundreds of years. Every generation says the same thing about the next generation. They've got it too easy. They work shy. They're entitled. They don't do it like we did in our day. This is just a natural generational thing, and I think we just have to accept that, they're a product of the environment that they've been brought up in, and that's not their fault, right? That's formed who they are. So we need to give them the environment within which they can be successful. But I don't necessarily think recruiting into a particular sector matters. It matters more about how they're treated day to day by their managers, and do their managers understand what they want? Are they helping them get it? Do their values align? Has the business got purpose? Do they treat people well?
As you know, we mentioned it before we came on. I'm very proud to say some of my youngsters, 6 of them have gone on to start their own recruitment businesses after we sold the business. So they started as resources, then consultants. Some were team leaders, then managers and directors, and 6 of them have gone on and running their own businesses now, which is one. And that's what happens when sponges work. We had quite a few stones in the journey, but some sponges were really, they really took off. So
right, and you must be really proud that you've helped people build 6 businesses.
And also they a lot of them did it themselves. We pointed them in a direction, and wow, they just went and ran with it. So that's cool. We've got to we've done 50 minutes now. I've got the one change challenge. If a leader listening today changed just one thing in how they manage Gen Z, how should that be?
I hate these questions because it's never binary, is it? But
I know.
If I had to pick one thing, so I don't know whether you ever read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, an old book that still stands the test of time.
Yeah, it must be 60, 70 years old now.
Yeah.
But in that, he said, if you want to influence people, find out what they want and help them get it.
Yeah.
Right. So if I could say one thing is that people could go away and do now, it's actually go and have a conversation with your people, right? And understand why they're here, what they want, what it means to them, why it's important, and how you can help them get it. Because if you do, you will build trust, you'll build respect, and you'll build loyalty, right? And you'll start to understand what makes people tick. And I think it's really important that you understand people at that level, their internal and their external context, what's important to them. So find out what people want, how you can help them get it, right? And that will make a big difference. Because don't assume it's money. And if they do say money to begin with, it's like, well, how much do you want? What will it mean to you when you get there? How will it impact your life if you do, if you don't? And then what else? What else do you want?
Sometimes they say things that they think you want to hear. So you do have to ask a few more questions to peel that back.
Yeah, exactly. Like peeling the layers of the onion, isn't it?
Yeah. And any examples of some of your clients that you've been able to reposition with their own positioning with Gen Z? You know, have you got any good war stories with real success of A, hiring, B, nurturing and developing, and where the Gen Z pool within that organization is really learning and taking off?
I think, look, I encourage all of the managers that I work with to understand what motivates people, what demotivates people, what they value, what they, and that then always does filter through into them understanding people better and being much clearer about what their goals are. So that's usually successful. I have had cases where people have had that conversation and it turns out that they don't really want anything from this job. There's nothing they want to achieve professionally or personally. So that leads to some people leaving, right?
Yeah, but at least you've sorted a problem out before it's manifested in lots of ways. Yeah,
it's positive, but I think for me, cultural change is one of the hardest things to do. And I worked with the business 18 months ago. The culture was pretty toxic, right? So part of that was we had to remove some of that toxicity. But then rather than go to the remaining people and say, right, this is what we want the culture to be, this is what we're going to do, we put it back to the team and ran a workshop and said, right, how do you want to define the culture of this business? What do you want people to be saying about it? What do you want to be feeling, hearing, seeing when you come into work? And we got them to define that culture. And it was around fun, and it was around high performance, it was around constant learning. Then it's like, okay, so what does high performance mean? How will we know when we're a high performance team? What are we doing well? What do we need to do differently, start doing that will create that high performance? How will we know when we got there? So we got them to define it all, right? And as I say, because we did that, they followed through on lots of these actions. We put people in charge of different areas. We had a quarterly cultural meeting just to test the temperature. Every time we came back, I'd be right, okay, 180 degrees is cooked, 40 degrees is tepid. Where's the business sitting at the moment? And over time, I think we've created a great culture, and it's all Gen Z in that business.
Brilliant.
And they're working hard, they're enjoying themselves, they're learning, they're achieving goals. And I think that through doing something intentional, understanding how to get the best from them.
And I bet you see those businesses are growing in a market where other people are shrinking as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Look, there's and you'll know this probably better than me, but there's some businesses out there that are doing really well at the moment.
Yeah.
There's some businesses that are doing quite badly, and on the surface they operate in similar markets, they're similar sizes, but I believe it comes down to actually how they drive performance through their people. Do they really understand their people? Are they providing the right environment? Is their purpose, is their value? So I think that's the difference between businesses that are succeeding and struggling a bit at the moment.
No, thank you, Ashley. And it reiterates and reminds me of the stuff you helped me with back at Principal People in 2016, 2017, when we were on that growth journey with those youngsters. It really, really helpful. And so glad you've joined Team. You can add so much value to business owners and their staff to help them really focus on their journey. So great session today. Thank you
you
very much indeed. If you connected to this, but this will be recorded and available on the hub if you want to watch again or share with your people, or if any of you employees are watching this and want your boss to see it, make sure they catch it up on the hub well, as soon as Jahish has loaded it up there soon. Ashley, see you soon. Hopefully at one of the team face-to-face meetings. I think you're going to.
I'll be at the London one, yeah, in a couple of weeks.
Cool. That looking forward to that. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks,
Bye for
everybody.
now.
Bye.
Thank you.